Neanderthals did not inherit a gentle earth. They were forged in a world where nature had no sentiment, no softness, only unrelenting tests of will. Towering glaciers loomed like sleeping gods, unmoved by the lives that struggled beneath them. Winds screamed across barren plains, carving into flesh like blades of ice. In the dim silence of vast coniferous forests, predators the size of horses prowled lions, hyenas, and cave bears, whose hunger matched the cold's cruelty. Food was unpredictable. Warmth was fleeting. Illness, injury, or miscalculation could mean death. And for most Neanderthals, life ended before their mid-30s. This was not an age of comfort. It was an age ruled by a single brutal law: survive or vanish. But they were built for this crucible. Nature shaped their bodies into machines of endurance, short-limbed, thick-boned, densely muscled. The average Neanderthal male stood just over 5 feet 5 inches and weighed between 150 to 175 pounds, resembling more a heavyweight powerlifter than a fragile hunter. Their pale skin captured scarce winter light, while heavy brows and powerful noses warmed the frozen air before it reached their lungs. Broad faces, deep-set eyes, and barrel-shaped chests weren't defects, they were armor. Inside those robust skulls, Neanderthals housed brains slightly larger than ours, but with a different focus. Where Homo sapiens evolved for language, imagination, and symbolic thought, the Neanderthal brain excelled at precision, spatial memory, balance, and brute pragmatism. Their minds weren't wired for poetry or myth. They were honed for terrain, tension, and the mathematics of the hunt. Every neuron was dedicated to the immediate, the physical, the real. In their world, there was no room for hesitation, only instinct, strength, and an unwavering will to endure. In a world where nature showed no mercy, adaptation became the Neanderthals' greatest weapon. They did not merely endure the Ice Age, they engineered their survival through ingenuity, born of necessity. They mastered fire, not just as a source of heat, but as a companion against the cold and darkness. Flames crackled within stone hearths, tucked beneath cave ceilings and under ancient cliffs, casting flickering light upon the rough-hewn walls. These hearths were lifelines, their embers a fragile defiance against an unforgiving wilderness. With skilled hands, Neanderthals shaped stone into cutting blades, spear points, scrapers. They carved bone into awls and needles, turning sinew and hide into clothing. Their tools were not crude improvisations, but purposeful, efficient, and refined over generations. These implements spoke of a practical intelligence, deeply attuned to the raw materials around them. Their shelters, whether caves or temporary hide-covered structures, were neither warm nor welcoming. They were damp, choked with smoke, vulnerable to collapse and predators. Yet inside these humble spaces, a revelation took root. Neanderthals buried their dead. Not discarded, not abandoned, buried. Carefully placed in shallow graves, often alongside stone tools or animal bones. These bodies mark one of humanity's earliest glimpses into symbolic thought. Such burials hint at grief, memory, even reverence. They suggest that the Neanderthal mind was capable of reflection, that they understood, however faintly, the finality of death. Though they lacked written language, they were not mute. Communication flowed through guttural sounds, hand gestures, facial cues. Their vocabulary may be lost to time, but their actions etched in sediment and ash speak volumes. In those gestures, in those graves, we glimpse the quiet birth of human emotion. To the Neanderthals, survival was written in blood, bone, and breath. Their lives were tethered to the hunt not by choice, but by design. In the Ice Age, meat was not a luxury, it was a lifeline. Without it, they wasted away. Without fat, their bodies could not withstand the relentless cold. And without hides, there was no protection from snow, wind, or night. Every part of the animal mattered, and every hunt was a calculated gamble between life and death. Their prey was nothing short of monumental. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, massive steppe bison creatures that would dwarf modern hunters and terrify modern minds. But for Neanderthals, these beasts were not myths. They were Monday. These hunts were acts of precision and courage, built on instinct honed through generations. Neanderthals worked in silence, coordinating through gesture and familiarity. One would confront the animal head-on, risking everything to draw its attention. The others, hidden, would emerge from the flanks, with spears in hand and death in their eyes. Once the creature fell, and only if it fell, it had to be butchered swiftly. Time was not on their side. Spoilage came fast in fluctuating conditions, and the scent of blood summoned predators. Wolves, hyenas, rival humans. They worked with ruthless efficiency, separating fat from flesh, marrow from bone. Injuries were not rare. Broken limbs, crushed ribs, deep lacerations, these were badges of the trade. Yet what's remarkable is not just the wounds, but their healing. Neanderthal skeletons show signs of recovery from injuries that would have killed a solitary animal. This reveals something astonishing. They nurtured one another. They stayed. They fed the wounded, stoked the fire, kept them warm. In a world ruled by survival, compassion was not weakness, it was strategy. It was the understanding that in small groups, no one was expendable. And in that shared pain and patience, the Neanderthals showed us that care is as ancient as the hunt itself. As the Ice Age dragged on and climate shifted, the Neanderthals, ever resourceful, adapted their ways of living to match the unforgiving world around them. Though they once relied heavily on the shelter of caves, necessity pushed them into the open. And there, on wind-swept plains and beside icy rivers, they began to shape homes from death-raising dwellings from the bones of the very creatures they hunted. Massive mammoth ribs and tusks formed the skeletons of their shelters. Thick hides, stitched together with sinew, were draped over these frames and anchored with stone. Fires glowed in the heart of these structures, casting flickering shadows on the curved walls. Beneath them, floors were insulated with dried moss and grasses, providing what little warmth could be stolen from the cold ground. These were not crude lean-tos, but thoughtfully constructed wind-resistant domes, the earliest expressions of human architecture tailored for survival. Practicality ruled every aspect of Neanderthal life. But even in this world of utility, something unexpected bloomed: beauty. Bones were not only used for tools or structures, they were engraved, arranged, and even adorned. Neanderthals painted with ochre, daubing symbols and patterns onto stone and perhaps even their own skin. Teeth trophies of the hunt or tokens of kinship were strung into necklaces and worn on the body. Were these expressions of spirituality? Were they meant to mark identity, status, morning gore, simple aesthetic desire? We may never fully know. But one thing is clear. These were not mindless brutes. They were thinkers, feelers, creators, Their world was harsh, but their minds were not barren. Even amid scarcity, they sought meaning, ritual, perhaps even comfort and beauty. In the architecture they built and the symbols they left behind, the Neanderthals revealed themselves not just as survivors, but as humans of a different kind, with hearts and hands that yearned for more than just survival. Around 40,000 years ago, the winds began to shift not just in climate, but in fate. The once familiar world of the Neanderthals began to unravel. Vast tundras that had long supported roaming herds of mammoths and bison gave way to encroaching forests. The great beasts they had relied upon for food, clothing, and tools either migrated beyond reach or vanished altogether. Their tried and true hunting strategies, so precise, so effectivino, longer bore fruit in a world that was changing faster than they could adapt. And then came us. Homo sapiens arrived from the south, anatomically modern, behaviorally dynamic, and biologically relentless. We brought more than new tools. We brought adaptability. With flexible diets that included fish, shellfish, and plants, and the ability to coordinate in larger, more complex groups, we spread like wildfire. We carved out niches quickly. We adapted to forests, coastlines, mountains. We wove textiles, crafted traps, and passed knowledge across generations through intricate speech and symbols. The archaeological record paints a picture not of peaceful coexistence, but of uneasy proximity. Some Neanderthal DNA remains in us, suggesting brief contact, brief intimacy yet, the lack of shared settlements, hybrid tools, or cultural fusion implies something far more tragic than blending. The hints point toward displacement, competition, and perhaps even violence. Neanderthals may have been pushed to the edges of land, of resources, of survival itself, but they did not simply vanish in a single moment. Their extinction was not a dramatic end, but a slow dimming, like embers dying in the wind. Over generations, their populations thinned. Child mortality rose, fertility fell. Isolated, outnumbered, outpaced, they slowly yielded to time and tide. Yet they are not entirely gone. Their last whispers remain in the sediment, in the stone, and in us. Their bones speak. Their genes endure. Their story was not erased. It was folded into ours. Though the Neanderthals vanished as a distinct species, they did not vanish entirely. Their bones may rest beneath millennia of Earth, but their presence lingers in our blood, in our biology, in the silent architecture of our bodies. Nearly 2% of the DNA in most non-African modern humans carries traces of Neanderthal heritage, a genetic echo that links us to these ancient kin. This legacy is not symbolicity, it is tangible. Elements of our immune response, skin pigmentation, and even genes that influence mood and neurological traits bear their mark. Far from primitive, Neanderthals were innovators in their own right. They were the first known humans to produce birch bark tar, an early adhesive likely used to half stone tools to wooden shaft saw process, requiring both heat control and chemical insight. They likely wore simple, tailored clothing made from stitched animal hides, adapted for mobility and protection in bitter climates. Their bodies carried evidence of healed fractures and treated wounds, suggesting the use of rudimentary medicine perhaps, even herbal remedies drawn from their environment. Though they left behind no written language, signs point to speech. The structure of their hyoid bones and the complexity of their inner ear suggest that Neanderthals had the physical capacity for spoken language. though we may never know the cadence of their voices, the words they chose, or the stories they shared around the fire. But in their actions, in the tools and artifacts they crafted, they spoke volumes. They lived to the rhythm of nature's harsh drumbeat of footsteps in snow, of firelight against stone, of bone on flint. And in this rhythm, they carved out a place for themselves in the frozen theater of the Ice Age. Their knowledge, their instincts, their resilience did not die with them. It was passed forward, generation by generation, until one day it stood upright, looked skyward, and called itself human. What the Neanderthals left behind is not merely genetic, it is ancestral memory, woven into our instincts, whispered in our survival, etched in our endurance. They are gone, but not lost. They walk with us still. Their bones lie in glass cases, labeled and measured, studied under fluorescent light. Their skulls sit on museum shelves, silent sentinels of a forgotten era. But Neanderthals are not relics of the past. They are ghosts stitched into our biology, shadows that walk beside us still. Their blood pulses through our veins, quiet but undeniable. In the curve of our spines, in the strength of our grips, in the fire that flares in our eyes when we fight, protect, or survive, they live on. The Neanderthal spirit was never extinguished. It melted into us, subtly, invisibly, yet forever. They are not our ancestors, but our kin close enough to touch, distant enough to mourn. They remind us that the road of human evolution was never a straight path carved by progress, but a tangled, treacherous trail filled with branches, dead ends, and companions lost to time. These ancient humans laughed beside campfires, wept over their dead, risked their lives for their wounded, and stared into the same winter skies we see today. Their world was colder, darker, and crueler. But their capacity to feel, to bond, to endure, was no less profound than our own. They were not beasts, they were people, walking a parallel story that ended too soon. So, when you stand beneath a sky heavy with stars, and the wind stings your skin, think of them. Imagine a Neanderthal mother whispering to her child by the fire. Picture a hunter scanning the horizon for mammoth tracks. Feel the ancient breath of someone not unlike you, rising toward the night, never to return. Because in truth, we were never alone. And maybe, in some deep genetic memory, we never truly said goodbye. If this story stirred something ancient in you, subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows and journey with us deeper into the forgotten worlds that shaped who we are.